Today we have a crazy story of revenge of dragging a car away with a tow rope. We'll get into that in a bit, but first, he parked in front of our garage and swore at my wife and mother-in-law, so I helped him apply for jobs. A few years ago, my mother-in-law flew in from across the country to visit my fiancé, now wife, and I for a week. We live in an apartment in a busy part of downtown Vancouver, and our garage opens up into an alley right next to the entrance of a liquor store. We're often blocked in by people when trying to get home or leave. We've gotten into a few screaming matches with people before, but this one was my favorite / the worst. We were coming back pretty late in the evening, maybe around 8 to 9 p.m. This guy, we'll call him Christopher, had parked right in front of our garage door and went into the liquor store to buy some booze. When he came back out and saw us in our vehicle waiting for him to move so that we could park and be home, he made some snotty comment that we couldn't hear while still in our vehicle and got into his car. We thought he would drive away, but he just sat there, opened a "Hey y'all" and drank it while looking at us and laughing. I got out of the vehicle, walked over to him, and politely, honestly politely, I've gotten into too many screaming matches and just wanted to get home, and also didn't want my future mother-in-law to see me getting angry, asked him to move so that we could get inside. He basically responded by telling me to freak myself and that he would do what he wanted. I tried to explain that he was blocking our garage and asked him if he could just move up a bit so that we could get in. This escalated really quickly. He got out of the car and got really into my face. I, still not wanting to play out the situation in front of my future mother-in-law, stayed calm and just kept asking him to get back into his car and leave. Eventually, he started pushing me, clearly trying to start a fight. I called the police. While I was on the phone with them, he had put himself and his face centimeters from mine. I stepped back and put my arm out while still on the phone, and he walked into it. He started screaming about how I was assaulting him and how he needed police help. Because we were right downtown, the police arrived within a minute from when I'd made the call, still on the phone with the operator the whole time. As soon as they arrived, he changed his tone and attitude completely. He started telling them a sob story about how I had approached him in his vehicle and threatened him. Luckily, my fiancé and future mother-in-law were still in the car and completely backed up my story. He was also parked illegally in front of my parking garage, so the police quickly took my side and demanded that he leave. As he got back into his car, the police noticed his open can of "Hey y'all" in the console and immediately got him back out of the car and demanded that he perform a breathalyzer test. Unfortunately, he had finished the can before getting out, so he claimed that he had found the can on the road and was planning to bring it in for the 5-cent deposit. His alcohol level was also below the legal limit for driving, so the police couldn't do anything to charge him with a DUI. The police stayed until he left, but the last thing he did before driving away was throw his business card out of the window at me and ask, "You don't even know who you're messing with." I picked it up as he was driving away, already starting to plan my revenge, although with no idea of what I could do with his information. The next day, I looked Christopher up, and it turns out he was a freelance graphic designer. He had his own website with a bunch of his completed projects and his full PDF downloadable resume. I downloaded his resume and got to work. I started applying for jobs on Christopher's behalf. I had his real phone number, real address, and real full resume. He applied to every McDonald's in the area, Starbucks, TNT, grocery stores, movie theaters, literally any minimum wage jobs that I could find with a quick and easy application process. I must have applied for over 80 jobs for him, all using his real phone number and real resume. I kept this up for a few weeks, searching for more jobs whenever I had some free time. Unfortunately, I never got to see his face as he started getting callbacks. He was truly more than qualified for any of these jobs, but I like to think that for a month or two, he would receive phone calls throughout the week asking to set up job interviews, thinking that it was for his graphic design work, only to be told that it was for a McDonald's or Wendy's or wherever. A few months later, I went back to his website thinking that I would start the process again. He pulled that crap in front of my fiancé and future mother-in-law. I was salty, but his website had been taken down or moved to a new URL. You know, I've dabbled in graphic design over the years, and I definitely understand putting yourself out there and marketing yourself, but is it normal to include like an actual resume document? Like, I definitely understand having a page that's kind of like a resume with your past employers and where you've worked before, but it seems kind of weird to me to just have like a PDF file that you can just download where it's your actual resume. MFZilla commented, "Kinda surprised that the apartment complex didn't have towing services on standby for the situation. You know some tow company would gladly perch a truck nearby if they knew they could get 2 to 3 vehicles a night whenever someone wanted to illegally park and run in for a few beers. Also, nice petty revenge." Also, hi, I'm Steven, and if you enjoy awesome stories of revenge, it would be amazing if you left a like or left a review if you're listening to my podcast. Our next story is, they suspended me for a misunderstanding, so I took the best, much-needed vacation at their expense. On a Monday night, I asked my manager if I could have my morning shift covered. He said, "No worries, the new girl's coming in to train, and there will be plenty of servers for the slow lunch rush." Sounded good to me. The next day, the owner, who has the patience of a caffeinated squirrel, messages me asking why I didn't show up. I told him exactly what my manager said. He said she's not a real server yet, and the way he saw it, I missed my shift because I didn't have another waiter cover for me. So he suspended me for a week. I am their best waiter, never late, always on time, and pulling in the best reviews. Some reviews on Google even have my name in them, but I just said, "Alright boss, see you in a week." So I did what any overworked employee would do. I slept in, watched movies, played disc golf, and hung out with my friends and girlfriend. It was the most relaxing week I had ever had. On Friday night, the owner calls me begging for help. They were so short-handed, they were practically using the dishwashers as waiters. He wanted me to come in for Friday night, Saturday night, and Sunday morning, all while I was still on suspension. I told him I hadn't learned my lesson yet and could not possibly come in. When I came back the next week, everyone was very, very nice to me. They still are. This revenge definitely works, as long as you can afford to actually take that week off. Not that OP necessarily had much choice in the matter. Overland Oversea commented, "I worked for a major American corporation years ago, worked insane hours, generated them millions in profits, was set to earn 4 times the next best person in North America. They retroactively redid only my commissions to 20% of the original deal. I left that place and was glad to hear that the owner of the company, who was my biggest customer, stopped using them when he heard that I was gone. Millions in annual revenue gone. Even better, within 3 years, their business declined 60% at the location I thrived in. 20 years later, they've not grown from that low benchmark many years ago. I now work for a small competitor that took over 2/3 of the corporation's former market share. I'll see the president of my former employer soon at a conference. Looking forward to it." Our next story is family drama, petty payback. My dad passed away in 2009. This was a tense time for both me, my mother, and brother. Not only were we grieving his passing, but the loss of my grandma and grandpa, as there was a lot of animosity due to past drama, and we stopped speaking to them. I saw my father in the hospital and said my goodbyes, and was grateful for the time I had. A week or so later, a message showed up in my Facebook inbox. It was from my cousin Kayla. We rarely ever spoke to one another. As children, we never hung out during holidays or family events. I had no interest in the lifestyle she lived. The message was quite nasty. She wished my brother and I ill will, and that we had been the ones in the casket and not my father. I was not shocked by this behavior. I didn't respond, even though it was tempting to finally speak my mind. The only thing that came to mind was reporting her for harassment. I did. However, it wasn't only once. Every time I went into my spam folder to clear out unwanted messages and saw what she had written, I reported her page. I did this for a month straight. She had to start several new pages because of me. Kayla hasn't contacted me again since then. I'm not sure what Facebook account number she's at now either. I've recently had some pretty rotten luck getting people who I reported for very blatant violations actually in any kind of trouble. I mean, less surprisingly and more specifically, it was Twitter that I was reporting somebody on, and they said, "So-and-so didn't break any rules." But I say that to say, at least it's nice to see one social media is actually monitoring these things that get reported. Tremenda Karusha commented, "I can't believe she wrote that. What a horrible person. It's great you stood up for yourself by reporting her. I'm just glad you didn't let her nastiness get to you too much." OP responded commenting, "My father's family are not kind people. They never were to my brother, mother, and I. It comes from a false narrative fed to them by my grandmother. My grandmother believes my father was a saint and everyone else is the problem. Kayla took her side and we ended up taking the brunt of it. My eyes were open the day I said goodbye to my father at the hospital. She greeted me by saying, 'Oh, you're here. You aren't a loser like the rest of your family. From that point on, I wanted nothing to do with them. I was not going to be what they thought I was. I was going to be the opposite of everything they believed about me. Our next story is, sorry I'm not moving this fallen limb blocking the road fast enough for you. Let me just move it from in front of my car to in front of yours. I wish I could say the story had more exciting details than the title. After a big round of storms, I was driving to work and this woman had sort of been tailgating me for a bit. Nothing too severe, but annoying me because it's still raining out and the roads are slick. Nice car, middle-aged looking driver. I encountered a rather large branch on the road. I guess technically it was a limb, not sure where the line is between branch and limb. Any road, it was a big enough sucker, but I thought I could drag it off to the side. So I got out and with some huffing and puffing started to move it, and halfway through, the woman beeped her horn. I looked at her because I thought maybe she was trying to indicate something, some danger or something, but she just held her hands up in a, well, what is going on manner. I gesture at the big limb, trying not to increase the size of it with each telling, as if to say, can't you see this big thing I'm moving here? And she just throws her hands up further a little bit and then slaps them down on her steering wheel, or at least that was my perception at the time. In my efforts, I got things jammed up on a fire hydrant and I'm getting frustrated and wet and this POS behind me honks again. I finally finagle the limb to the side but continue to drag it behind my car, effectively getting the heavy, thick end back into a road blocking position right in front of her car. I wish I could say I had the balls to look her in the eye, but the moment I let it down, I realized how petty I was being and felt a sting of shame and mentally slapping myself for wasting time doing this. I hustled back into my car and drove off quickly, and when I guiltily glanced in the rearview, she had not gotten out or moved her car, and remained that way when I looked before rounding the bend. You know, legends say that still to this day that lady is still sitting there right behind that branch, waiting for some other person to move it. Just, you know, perpetually haunting that stretch of road. Maleficent 1908 commented, coming back on the tail end of Hurricane Katrina, like it was still storming tail end, my husband and father-in-law were moving and cutting fallen trees off the road with a line of useless jerks following behind who never made any effort to help. Once they reached father-in-law's house, they pulled into the driveway and stopped clearing debris. The driver behind them got out and had the stones to say, "You're just stopping?" Yeah, we're home. Bye. Our next story is, my aunt said therapy is for the faithless, so I let her quote my therapist. My aunt's the type to bring up prayer every time someone mentions therapy. She means well, but she once told my cousin that talking to a stranger about your problems instead of to God is a sign of spiritual weakness. I've been in therapy for a while now, quietly. It helps, but I never brought it up around her. She's always quick to offer a psalm when someone's struggling, but never space. A few weeks ago, we were at a family lunch. She opened up, said she felt spiritually dry and couldn't explain it. So I shared something my therapist once told me. Sometimes we mistake emotional exhaustion for a spiritual crisis. They feel the same, but they need different care. She blinked, said it sounded like something from a devotional, asked me to send her the quote. Now she's been texting me weekly for more little gems. Ooh, I send them, let her run with it. She's quoting my therapist every week, thinking it's divine revelation. Still tells people she doesn't believe in therapy. I just smile and say, we all find wisdom where we need it. Sometimes the best feeling is winning without the other person knowing they ever lost. I mean, I think I agree wholeheartedly with OP's last sentence there. I mean, in a way, even with them not knowing, did they really even lose? Like they're clearly getting a lot from what OP's saying to them. If they want to perfume it as some divine revelation, sure, let them be happy. BritBrat915 commented, I listened to a podcast that was religion-based and had a therapist guest. The therapist was also a religious person and mentioned her job wasn't to take the place of God, meaning she wasn't there to take the place of you praying or trusting, that her job was to help you understand more about yourself so you could better understand what you need to take God in prayer. I also come from a religious family who's not too keen on therapy combined with, what do you need that for? You can always just talk to me. And sure, sometimes talking to certain family members help to get things off my chest, but I also sometimes need to hear more than, oh, it'll be okay. Our next story is, won't give me my deposit back. Okay. Hello, fire department? Okay, this happened 32 years ago. I've never written this one down. Here we go. Back in '93, I lived in an old house in Vancouver's east side. Big old houses that were later split up into little apartments. This place had 6 units. I had a very convenient access to my apartment via an outside staircase that served as the fire escape. At first, the landlord was pretty cool. He gave me access to a leaky old garage out back. At 24 years old, I patched the roof and hauled a ton of furniture that had been left by former tenants. I did this for free, and he never charged me extra in rent for it. A year plus later, the landlord is beginning to be a butt to my roommates and myself because I keep pointing out problems within my unit. I point out that the outside staircase that climbs 3 flights up is pulling away from the house. There's even a ladder from that point that went to the attic unit. It wasn't safe. He told me not to use it and use the front door and use the inside staircase. Eventually, we couldn't stand his constant bull and gave him our 1-month notice. I cleaned everything, brought in a carpet cleaner. The apartment was left as mint as it could be. He refused to give me my deposit back. He states, "That's for the garage. I'm not giving it back." I was choked. I had been a good tenant, paying on time. This came out of the blue. This was unfair. He had never asked for extra money for the garage, nothing. Okay, Greg. Yeah, that was his name. Fine. If he wasn't going to return what was rightfully mine, he was going to pay my deposit to someone, guaranteed. And he sure did. Revenge 1, I called the fire department and formally complained about the fire escape. Told them how much space there was between them and the house, how you could see them flex as you used them. They were very interested. I put my name in it. I was legit, no anonymous BS. All the tenants had been friendly, some were true friends and buddies. The old guy, Mike, in the basement was a car guy, like me, and he had a stall in the garage. No charge either. We were tight. He didn't like Greg much either. He kept in touch and invited me over to his place months later, still in the basement, his door at the foot of a brand spanking new fire escape. Well, look at that. Greg had to fork out for a new staircase. I smirked. Mike knew I had called the fire department. Oh, that's not the half of it, Mike explains. Greg was such a belligerent freak that when bylaws came to visit, he got himself arrested. The cops came, cuffed him, and put him in a paddy wagon. He got a massive fine and was ordered to fix his stairs. That cost him over $16,000, which was a lot back then. You could not believe the satisfaction I felt. But it's not over yet. A little icing on the cake. Revenge 2, but not of my doing. My roommates really hated Greg, and by some sort of alignment of the stars, they rented an upper floor apartment together that was directly across the street from where Greg actually lived. Parking in the neighborhood was all street parking. Greg parked in an unfortunate spot one night, unfortunate for his car, as on that night, a watermelon fell from the sky. $16,000 is greater than $400. Sure, it was petty revenge, but I probably kept future tenants from dying by collapsing stairs or being stuck in a burning house. Yeah, I definitely don't think OP has anything to apologize for. I mean, if the fire escape is literally pulling away from the building, I feel like that is a frightening level of disrepair that place has fallen under. I mean, I would be worried about any of the other bones in that place. Our next story is, he robbed an old man. We delivered him straight to the cops. There's an old man called Robert in my village who's been a widower for years. He lives alone on a small farm just off the main road with chickens, a few goats, a horse, a garden, that kind of peaceful life. He's one of those people everyone calls a saint. He never raises his voice, always has biscuits for the kids, and always helps when someone needs something. When I was a kid, I used to spend afternoons at his place with my friends feeding the animals, running around the trees, and drinking juice from those old school glass bottles. One of those friends was David, a kid who came from a rougher background but was always welcome at the farm, just like the rest of us. Now we're all adults, and David didn't turn out great. He's known for petty crimes, always looking for a quick score. He was kicked out of his parents' house more than once, and most people had already cut ties with him, but not Robert. One night a few days ago, David knocked on Robert's door asking for a place to crash. It was cold and he said he had nowhere else to go. Robert, as always, let him in. He gave him a warm bed for the night. The next morning, he went to the local market to buy Choco-Pick cereal and something nice to make breakfast for David, but when he came back, he found David rummaging through a drawer where he kept some savings. Even after being asked what he had put in his pocket, David said no and took off. That broke something in me. Me and another friend who also grew up going to that farm tracked him down and pretended we didn't know anything. I offered him a ride and he said yes, as we usually do here, but instead of driving him to the center, we drove him straight to the police station. I explained everything to the cops and they arrested him because he confessed while waiting for Robert to show up. He's now in custody, awaiting trial. I hope justice is served. Robert cried in front of us not because of the betrayal, but because, in his words, "I thought you all had forgotten me." That broke my heart so badly. We stopped visiting as we grew up, just waving instead of stopping by. That made me realize how much of a piece of crap I am too, so now I'm visiting him at least once a month. He may have been robbed that day, but he also got a reminder. Not all of us turned out like David. Some of us remember who raised us and who helped keep us off the streets and away from temptation when we were kids. I protect what matters, always. I mean, I'm assuming it's the way he was brought up, but this David guy wasn't too bright, was he? I mean, when you're in that deep, I would imagine David should just continue to deny, right? Like, at least they would have to, try to find proof that you actually stole that money. But hey, at least he had a conscience, right? Tremeta Karusha commented, "While I would struggle with the decision to rat out a childhood friend, your unwavering commitment to doing what's right, even when painful, truly warms my heart. It shows that some people still possess great integrity and courage in their actions." OP responded commenting, "That's exactly what was on my mind. It hurts me to rat an old friend of mine. Man, it does. I have incredible memories with him, but at the end of the day, Robert needed justice." Our next story is, you want to claim my answers as your own? Okay. When I was in the 10th grade, we had a new student who quickly got into the crowd of guys who liked to bully me, the quiet kid, at school. He made fun of my tennis shoes once, claiming his were much more expensive. They were clear plastic on top and you could see his socks through them, and that I could probably buy 5 pair of mine for what he paid for his. Me thinking that was a poor financial decision because my parents raised me to be super frugal, just replied, "Okay," and left it at that. 3 days later, he wore the shoes to watch the school's football game and they cracked in the cold and were ruined. Another time we were in history class and were playing a game where the class was divided into 2 teams and one person from each team would go up to the whiteboard, wait for the teacher to ask a question, and write the answer as fast as possible before the other person did to win a point for your team. When it was my turn, this same kid was my opponent. We were asked the first question and I thought I knew the answer and so did he, so we started writing furiously, but I finished before him. He realized our answers were different and called out my answer as if it had been what he had guessed all along and, by declaring it verbally, would get the point first. We were both wrong, so we get a second question. Each set of opponents got 3 tries to get a point before they had to sit down and move on to the next. The same thing. The teacher asks a question, we both start writing rapidly. His handwriting is so chicken scratch that it's illegible. I finish first. He points at my answer and calls it out loud, trying to get credit. Once again, the answer was wrong. Last chance to earn a point. I'm beginning to pick up a pattern. The teacher asks a question. I realize I still do not know the answer, but a light comes on when I realize he's waiting for me to put my answer on the board because he doesn't know either. So I go, "Oh," and started writing something on the board really fast. And when I stepped back, he pointed at my answer, not having bothered to write one of his own, and read it off. "Stupid, hey!" The class lost their crap, and the teacher tried her best to tell me that wasn't nice, but she was failing to suppress her laughter. In the end, my team lost, but I felt like I'd won. I feel like this might be a wild jump, but this story kind of reminded me of Charles Barkley. He's a basketball analyst on TNT for the halftime shows and whatnot. The television crew once put a teleprompter in front of him for a supposed ad read and he just read right through it, and right at the very bottom it just said "I'm a dumb you-know-what." Rolled right through it, said it out loud, and then closed his eyes in inward pain as he realized he just read that right off. Valblaze commented, "In high school, some friends and I had an agricultural science class, 2 in one row of desks, and 2 directly behind them. We passed notes back and forth as one does, and the teacher was getting annoyed. Some other kids who didn't like us kept calling out when we passed a note, claiming we were disrupting their education or something similar. The teacher declared the next time they saw us pass a note, they could read it to the class. So, being the genius I thought I was, I scribbled a note and handed it off. They read it, tried not to laugh, and we passed it around a couple of times until they noticed. The kid gets the teacher's attention and is given permission to read the note, stands in front of the class and reads loud and clear, "I am an idiot, pass it along." The class laughed, the teacher laughed, I got punched in the face after school. Our next story is bathroom break the door down. Was on my way to class one day recently and had to stop at a gas station bathroom for an emergency poop session. I'm in there for like 2 minutes when someone jiggled the handle, found it locked, then knocked on the door. I said, "Someone's in here," thinking that would be enough to deter them until I was finished. Not even a full minute later, another handle jiggle followed by a more forceful knock. "Someone's in here," I said again. Another minute, maybe a minute and a half passes max. Another bout of furious knocking. Me, getting fed up, said, "Someone's still in here," to which this lady replied, "Well, when are you coming out?" I said, "I don't know, you'll just have to wait." At this point, I was done using the bathroom, but she ticked me off so much that I stayed in there for another 10 minutes, just playing on my phone, and she got fed up and left. Now I get it, they're giving you a lot of grief and making your emergency poop time really uncomfortable, but OP has to be equitable and think about other people here. She was probably having her own big emergency poop time with no accessible toilet. Exempt 1 commented, "You should have let her in and then did the same to her the minute she got in there. Reminds me of yesterday at a stoplight to make a left-hand turn. I'm the third car in line, light turns green and person in front just sits there and then sits there some more, so I hit my horn. This freaker still sitting there, car in the middle pulls out and goes around, person still sitting there takes off when the light turns yellow, thinking they got me. Joke's on you, guy. I ran the light, passed him on the highway and flicked him off." Our next story is, "Oh, I just rent here? Well, now I'm the president of this HOA and owner of this unit." From 2015 through early 2018, my wife, then girlfriend, and I moved apartments constantly, which got old fast. Then in May 2018, luck struck as a condo owned by my best friend's parents, Dan, had a tenant moving out after a decade. Since Dan is my best friend, and I also do his parents' taxes, I snagged first dibs. This condo was sentimental to me because I spent middle school and high school hanging out there with Dan. So moving in felt like returning home, but this time, I would be building new memories with my wife. The condo building has 8 units, each assigned 2 parking spots, and of course, being a condo, there was HOA and common charges, common areas, etc. My unit was the only unit being rented. The other 7 were owner occupants, the same ones I remembered from my childhood visits. One neighbor stood out, let's call her Karen. The resident no one liked because she always made things either difficult, awkward, or unpleasant. She lived alone, which also meant that she always had an empty second parking spot. One day in October of 2018, Karen rapidly rang my doorbell demanding to know if a random car in her empty spot was mine or anyone's I know. It wasn't, and I told her so, but she still seemed distressed before awkwardly leaving. Odd, but whatever. Then, in October 2018, my wife dropped me off at the airport and returned home to find a lime green Jeep with oversized tires parked in her, my wife's, assigned spot. However, my wife noticed that the Karen's second parking spot was empty and considered parking there, but ultimately decided against it, seeing as how dramatic Karen was the last time some random person parked in her empty spot. So rather than trying to track down the owner by ringing 7 different doorbells, my wife decided instead to park directly behind the Jeep in a T-shape, essentially blocking the Jeep, and left a polite note. "I parked behind you, come to Unit A and I'll move my car so you can leave." A whole hour goes by, and then guess who aggressively starts ringing our doorbell again? The one and only Karen. She immediately started yelling at my wife. "You are so immature. That's my friend. She was only here for 5 minutes. You couldn't wait. You do best to remember that you just rent here," and then stormed off. Now, her friend, owner of the Jeep, instead of simply asking my wife to move, drove over the shared front lawn, ruining the grass and flowers, and all the while, Karen's empty second spot sat unoccupied. Fast forward to what has happened since the day she said those words, "You just rent here." 2019, my girlfriend and I got engaged. 2021, we got married. October of 2021, almost to the day of the incident, we became homeowners, officially purchasing the condo from Dan's parents. 2022, the HOA president of 20 years stepped down, and 5 minutes later, I was voted in to be the president. Obviously, Karen didn't vote for me. Upon accepting my nomination in front of the HOA, I couldn't resist but say, "Well, so much for just being renters here." All the other unit owners laughed a little and clapped, except for Karen. She seemed in disbelief. I don't know if it was of what I said or the fact that I became president of the HOA, having lived there for only a few years compared to her decades of living there, and to this day, the look on her face lives rent-free in my head. Of course, I didn't do all of this just to get back at Karen. That would be sad. But it is pretty sweet that anytime we cross paths or my wife and I see her, we get to smirk now and give her the fake, "Hi, how are you?" She never answers back or says hi, but we don't care because hey, we just rent here. FYI, she has not rang our doorbell since, and our parking spots have never been taken by another car since. So let me get this straight. She had an empty parking spot that sat unoccupied all that time, and they had a friend come over and they said, "Oh no, don't park in that spot. That's my open, empty lot that I like to keep perpetually open." Like, was the ghost of their past partner perpetually parked there? Like, was it a weird spiritual thing? Did they just like the optics of an empty parking spot? Our next story is, don't pay your bill? I'll remove your door. My friend has a glass business, replaces broken doors, windows, etc. One time this denier shop got broken into and they hired him to replace their broken glass door. My friend's business replaced it and billed him. He viewed the invoice and didn't pay for weeks. My friend kept following up and he would ignore him, never paid the invoice. He ended up blocking my friend's number. My friend calls again from a different number and says, "If you don't pay, I'll remove the door." Ignored again. My friend waits until Friday at midnight and goes to remove the door himself. Alarms go off, store wide open in the middle of a busy street. All of a sudden, he has 30 missed calls from the shop owner begging for the door back and that he'll pay the invoice. He told him he can hire another company to install a new door for him and he doesn't want his business. Shop owner was begging and my friend didn't budge and blocked his number. Edit, I know what he did was illegal. Please keep in mind my friend was 22 or 23 years old when this happened about 3 years ago. They're Middle Eastern, both the friend and the shop owner, and trust me when I say we Middle Easterners don't go through court for anything and solve the problem ourselves. I, a 30-year-old woman, grew up with this guy and he was much younger than me, but now we're both business owners and he's done glass for my store, etc. Very successful kid now. I have no time or reason to lie about this story. I just saw the Petty Revenge Reddit and thought of that story from years ago. It kind of reminds me of some stories and videos I've seen of landscapers and pavers who, when they didn't get paid, literally went back and ripped up all the cement or the tiles or even plants and things. I mean, I imagine in the eyes of the law, it's probably not legally right, but you're already out on your investment anyway, so might as well make sure the other side is too. Hip to the World's BS commented, "If I was your friend, I would have said, sure, I'll reinstall a door, but the base price goes up to 10 times the original invoice and then 10 times that price for emergency reinstallation. Can't afford it? Too freaking bad." Our next story is, my neighbor kept parking in my driveway, so I parked behind him and went out of town. My neighbor's been parking in my driveway for months. I've asked him not to a bunch of times, but he always goes, "It's just for a sec," and shrugs it off. Came home last Friday and yep, there he was again. Only thing was, I was heading out of town for the weekend. So I pulled in behind him, locked up, grabbed my stuff, and left a couple of hours later. I had a bunch of missed calls and a text like, "Dude, what?" But I didn't answer it. I hope he had a relaxing weekend to think things through. To be fair, I think OP handled this pretty amicably. OP had every right to Karen out and be all upset that somebody's taking their driveway parking spot, but OP simply said they told them not to a bunch of times. I mean, you can only warn somebody not to run into oncoming traffic so many times before it just inevitably bites them. Wolfpack85 commented, "I did this once. My driveway and my neighbor's driveway are adjoining. There's a fence that goes down the length of the driveway to separate them. They were having a party on a Saturday, which never bothers me. What did bother me was a couple of their guests had parked in my driveway. I asked the neighbors to have them move them when I came home. I was met with a 'I don't have to' from the owners of the cars. so I parked behind. Hours later, I heard the knocking, I heard the doorbell, I heard the banging, but I didn't answer the door. Knocking started around 11 a.m. the next day. I answered. They asked me to move my car, and I said, I don't have to, and I shut the door. It was a holiday weekend too, Memorial Day last year, and I was off work until Tuesday. I didn't leave my house until then. This Memorial Day weekend, they had the same party, only difference is no one parked in my driveway. Our next story is, whose panties are these? I was dating a girl and she lived in a large old Victorian house that was split up into 3 apartments. My girlfriend lived on the first floor in a single bedroom. There was a couple on the second floor and a single girl on the third. Everyone was around the same age, in their mid to late 20s. In the basement was a coin-operated laundry setup. One day, my girlfriend calls me while I'm at work because her car is stuck in the driveway due to snow. My boss let me run over to her apartment and help her. When I get there, I noticed that one side of the driveway was nicely shoveled, and the side my girlfriend parked on appeared to have the snow from the clear side just piled up on her side. It turns out the guy with the girlfriend hastily shoveled his side of the driveway and just tossed it all around one side in the front of my girlfriend's car. He was outside getting ready to leave for work when she walked out. She started her car and could not get out of the driveway. Just before he left, she asked him if he could help her. She told me he looked right at her, said nothing, and got into his car and drove away. That guy always seemed weird to me. This was enough to get my wheels spinning. Shortly after this incident, my girlfriend and I moved her out of her apartment and moved in together. Before we left, I did something. Remember the coin laundry? It wasn't uncommon for someone to put their dirty laundry on the floor next to the washing machine or dryer as if to wait in line. Before we turned my girlfriend's keys, I went into the basement, took a pair of thongs out of the single girl's laundry basket, and put them in the pocket of that dude's pants. I know his girlfriend did the laundry, and he never did. At least, I never saw him do it. I will never know if she found them and cross-examined him as to why another woman's thong was in his pants pocket, but I like imagining the look on his face when she asked him. Also, the girl upstairs might think he stole her panties and figured him to be a creeper. I feel bad for relocating the girl from the third floor's panties, but it was worth it. I mean, the revenge is good, and I imagine it'll work if they do inspect the pockets, which I've learned many a time to thoroughly do. The last mistake I made was leaving my credit card in my pants pocket, which thankfully came out alright even through the dryer. That said, and I imagine I'm not alone on this, it is kind of crappy to see an innocent bystander like that third floor girl get dragged into the middle of this. I mean, God forbid the girlfriend is one of those people that are overly willing to believe their man before anything else, and all of a sudden the third floor girl is being accused of trying to make a move or something. Our next story is, he kept hogging the laundry machines, so I introduced him to the waiting game. We share the laundry in my apartment building, 4 washers, 4 dryers. It was a first come, first served situation, but there's an unspoken rule: do not leave your stuff sitting there for hours. If it's done and you're not back in a reasonable time, someone will gently move it so they can have access to the machines. Then comes Basket Guy. Every Saturday morning, he loads all of his clothes into 3 washers at once and vanishes for hours. Not only does he leave wet clothes in the machines, but he also leaves his laundry baskets on top so no one can move his stuff without awkwardly putting it on the floor. We complained, left notes, and literally nothing changed. Last weekend, I arrived 10 minutes after his washers had stopped. He was nowhere in sight. I decided I have had enough. I emptied the washers, stacked his clothes on the folding table, and I waited. With a book, in a chair, right next to the dryers. He came in at 40 minutes later with his usual smug-faced, everyone will wait for me vibe, and stopped dead when he saw me sitting there with his clothes folded like I was doing inventory. He mumbled something like, "Hey, I was gonna be right back." I smiled and said, "Of course, you always are." I smiled and said, "Of course, you always are." Then I put my clothes in the dryers, all 4 of them, and started them up. Not a single item of his made it into a machine. He stood there with his wet laundry and no baskets because I'd also moved those to the locked lost and found closet next to the mailroom, which had a keyed entry and he didn't have access. He hasn't pulled the triple wash disappearing act since then. I mean, I don't really want to be a jerk, but how many times do you experience this before you just go screw it and you pull out those clothes and you don't put them in the bucket, you just flop them on the ground? Like, I just know I would be having some like tired chore day and I'm miserable. I just want to knock out my laundry and I go in there and I see something like that. I might want to just spread his entire wardrobe all over the floor and start doing a tap dance. The Shrew Means Well commented, I lived in a similar building with a similar inconsiderate jerk. He was always doing the same thing as OP described. Someone apparently had enough of his crap and pulled his clothing out of the washers, dumped them on the floor of the laundry room in a big pile, and took a crap on them. A literal crap. Whoever this hero was, they wisely didn't put any of their clothing in the washing machines. There was never a problem again of stopped machines full of washed or dried clothing for hours. Our next story is, my coworker kept stealing my pens, so I started refilling them with glitter ink. I work in this pretty chill office, but for whatever reason my pens kept missing. Not like all my pens, just mine, the ones I actually liked using. I kinda had a feeling who it was, but didn't want to cause drama. Then one day, I saw her using my purple gel pen during a meeting. I said something like, hey, I think that's mine, and she just laughed and went, oops, didn't even notice. So I ordered some cheap refillable pens and swapped the ink for glitter gel. They looked normal when you wrote with them, but dried all sparkly and ridiculous. Next meeting, she's writing away and someone goes, why does your notebook look like a birthday card? She just stared at it like it betrayed her soul. My pens haven't gone missing since. No apology or anything, just awkward silence. Honestly, I'll take it. I feel like this is almost a grade school level revenge, where like a bully keeps taking your things, so to get revenge and stop them from doing so, you do it only like wrapped in pink stuff, basically making whatever it is that they are stealing so like perceivably emasculating to them. I'm not stealing that. A Touch of Trouble commented, I kept black ink in a pink pen shell. I worked with governed documents, so ink other than black or blue was a no-go. Everyone knew it was black in disguise, but no one took it because I kept an actual pink pen on my desk for personal notes. They had a 50-50 to get the black pen, but the odds were never in their favor. Our next story is, I'm sorry, you need to go to the service desk, sir. I was working at Toys R Us in the 1990s. It was Christmas Eve. Normally I worked in the electronics booth, but the lines were very long at checkout, so they asked me to work a register. It was 1 hour before the store closed, but we knew we had to work at least an extra hour after closing just to cash out the large amount of last-minute customers. Christmas Eve was the busiest day of the season. I'd worked there for a few years, so I knew the drill and just embraced the holiday spirit. While cashing people out, I noticed a man in the back of the line. He was being rude to everyone around him. He was complaining that the store didn't have anything good for his son, and he was settling on a rather expensive remote-controlled car. As he got closer, he started complaining about the amount of items that the woman in front of him had, and that she should let him go ahead of her. She had a small baby with her that was crying and she couldn't seem to calm it down, so the last thing she wanted to do was hang around in the store any longer. She only had maybe 10 or 12 items, so it really wasn't that much. The woman behind him spoke up basically to leave her alone and remind him it was the holiday season, etc. She was pleasant about it and not at all rude. He then started on her. He finally reached the front of the line. He handed me his credit card and told me to hurry up and insinuated I sucked at my job because the line was so long. What he didn't know is I scanned his remote-controlled car 3 times. The car was a few $100s, pretty expensive by 1990s standards. As I was giving him the receipt and his credit card telling him to have a nice holiday, I noticed my mistake. I stopped him and said that I was so very sorry and that I accidentally scanned his item multiple times. The scanner sometimes does that, and I am so sorry. He looked at me as if I was the dumbest person he had ever met. He then told me to fix the problem fast. This is the best part. I told him I couldn't do anything after a final sale after the register had been closed, and that he would have to go to our service desk to get the issue solved. I gestured to the service desk, and there were probably a dozen people in that line. The only way he could get his money was if he went and waited for a manager to handle the return. He was so ticked. After he finally reluctantly went to the service desk, the lady behind him in line said to me, I feel like you did that on purpose. I advised that only a terrible person would do such a thing. As she walked out, she said, "We need more terrible people like you in this world." The next 2 customers expressed their approval of the situation as well. It made my day to inconvenience that guy like he did everyone around him in line. This next story is, she picked her ex and took the dog. I took the money. Guess who came barking back? So my ex and I have been having a really hard time lately. She decided she wanted to go back to her ex and has been a bee ever since. We broke up and now she wants everything, including the dog that she never even wanted in the first place. She loves that dog too, but never walked him, hated cleaning up little surprises here and there and whatever. I wanted the dog, plus I trained him and paid for professional training, so I took responsibility for him and we've been buddies ever since. The problem is that she wants me to move out and wants half of everything. We weren't even married. Anyway, the house is a rental, but I always paid for it and I was living here before we even started dating. So nope, not today, girl. She wanted to move in with her ex because he lives with his parents, but not today. So what did she do? She managed to get inside without being seen by the cameras since she knows the dead angles, and got into the backyard and called for the dog since the door has that little hole for the dog to go outside whenever he wants. How dumb do you have to be to hide from the cameras but then scream his name? The cameras also record sound, so I just went to the police station and they said they couldn't do anything because we're not married and there's no evidence that we actually broke up or that she entered the house illegally. Alright, so I went to her parents' house looking for the dog since she didn't reply to my messages, and my buddy heard me and immediately started barking and trying to come in my direction. Her mom didn't want to open the door completely so he couldn't get to me, and even closed the door mid-conversation so I couldn't get the dog. No worries, we had a joint bank account with some savings that we both invested in, even though I invested 80% or more, and we had agreed to split it 50-50. So, no dog, no money. I transferred all that money into a crypto wallet and waited 2 days. All of a sudden, she remembered my number and asked what happened to the money. I told her I invested it in crypto, but I could cash it out, and gave her a choice. She could choose between getting the money back or keeping the dog, and she opted for the money. Suddenly, she agreed to give me back my dog, so she did, but it sucked so bad that unfortunately, I lost all the money. What a gambler I am, huh? By the way, there are no more dead angles at home. So it didn't necessarily work out for OP here. I feel like the police utterly failed them. Like, I don't really even understand how whether or not they broke up is a thing the police have to question or look into. Like, if it's OP's house and OP says that person had no right to be there, shouldn't that be what the police are focused on? And especially if OP asserts that that dog is their property and they have documentation of paying for it, caring for it, vet bills, training bills. I think in the eyes of the law, most courts are going to side with OP being the rightful owner. Stillhand2128 commented, "When my dad kicked me out at 17, I took my dog with me. My mom had bought me the dog before I moved in with my dad. My dad called and offered $1,000 for the dog because my little siblings would miss her too much and he knew I could use the money. I was broke living with a friend, but still said no. They got a new dog and named it my dog's name." Our next story is Multiplication Quiz Revenge. This happened when I was in 5th grade, although it was unintentional petty revenge. A fellow student, whom I'll call Hank, was really good at multiplication. Once a week, we would be handed a sheet with multiplication problems on it. We were supposed to do as many as possible within a certain amount of time. After the time was up, we would switch sheets with another student. We would grade each other's sheets while the teacher called out the answers. Anyone who finished the sheet with 100% correct answers got a candy bar as a prize. I never finished my sheet, but Hank always finished his and got every answer correct. The teacher would hand him his candy bar with much praise, calling him her champion. He would smirk and crow, hold up the candy bar, and flash us the victory sign. It was annoying that he rubbed his victory in, but he did earn the prize. Admittedly, we were also jealous as no other student was able to even come close to matching his record. Hardly anyone else ever won a candy bar. One day, when the time was up, I went to switch sheets for grading. I noticed that Hank had not switched sheets with anyone, so I tried to hand him my sheet in exchange. He refused and we got into an argument. The teacher wasn't happy that we were talking out of turn and told us to go write our names on the board in disgrace. After that, I gave up and switched sheets with another student, and Hank won his candy bar yet again. But I was a teacher's pet, and had never had to write my name on the board before. It bothered me. So during lunchtime, I went to the teacher and explained why I was talking out of turn. She said she understood and told me not to mention the situation to anyone. The next week, when we had our usual multiplication quiz, after the time was up, she asked if everyone had switched sheets. Everyone agreed that they had, and then she asked, "Who has Hank's sheet?" No one answered, so she said, "Well, whose sheet does Hank have?" Again, no one answered, so she went over and picked up his sheet. She looked at it and then displayed it so the whole class could see it. He had half-heartedly done just a few of the problems, and the rest of the answers were blank. It turned out that he'd been grading his own sheet and filling in the correct answers as they were called out by the teacher. The whole rest of the year, he never got another candy bar, and that smirk was history. See, I think the problem here is the teacher used the honor system with a bunch of grade students. To be fair though, if I were in Hank's position, if I could get away with grading my own sheet, I probably would fudge it up a little bit too. I mean, I'm gonna be honest, I think in my 6th grade math class, they even had some self-grading stuff going on like that, and I'll be honest, I did give myself a bit of a grading curve every time. Comfortable Enough 98 commented, "In the beginning, Hank almost sounded just like me back when I was in 3rd grade, but in the end, the difference was I was honest and still got them all right. My teacher was suspicious of me, so when we traded papers, I had to trade with the teacher, and she handed me her key paper. And the smirk was for me knowing I got it all right. What's even funnier is I checked the key paper to find out if the answer sheet was all correct." Our next story is, "People keep playing music in the pool area after hours, so I play my own music on a loop at max volume. So it's summer, I'm in an apartment next to the pool, the walls are thin, as in if you have a conversation in the pool area, I can hear it, which sucks, but hey, it's a common area. And the place is supposed to close down at 10 p.m. Not what I would like, but those are the rules. As you can guess by the title of this thread, people are ignoring the closing hours and staying up as late as 2 a.m. or 4 a.m. at some hours, talking or occasionally playing music. I did it all. Called the front office, who told me to call the cops, who said they wouldn't really do much. There is no county noise ordinance. No county noise ordinance, you say? Keep in mind, I do know they will enforce obscenity. Texas gonna Texas. So starting last Friday, when 10 p.m. rolled around and kids were out playing music and screaming in the pool, I pulled out my own Bluetooth speaker and played What's New Pussycat on repeat until people left. Saturday rolls around and there's an email stating the front office is going to lock the pool gates at 10. They did Saturday night, but Sunday night? Nope. And there's a party going on, tons of kids screaming. Out comes the speaker, and we do What's New Pussycat on a loop. So far, no one's lasted longer than 30 minutes with it. So I'm gonna be honest, my mind went straight to, that's Tom Jones, that can't be that bad. I know it's right off of Great Grandpa's playlist, but Tom Jones is pretty good. I like to break out the Carlton every now and then. But then I took another listen to What's New Pussycat, and it is just way too repetitive. The best way I could describe it would be like annoying merry-go-round music. It's a far cry from It's Not Unusual. LoveNuts80 commented, "Playing The End by The Doors on repeat is guaranteed to clear people out. It's one long and depressing song." Fun fact, my friends used to do karaoke to that song and would clear out the bar he sang at. He was a jerk, but my 22-year-old mind at the time thought it was kind of funny. Our next story is The Hidden Notes. Many years ago, I worked in an ad agency. One of the account managers was the stupid bint who had a grudge against my department and pretended to work late, even later than us, and go and snoop on the drawers and try to find stuff to stitch on us to the boss. This was the days before hot desking. I had decided I was leaving in a few months, so I was just earning the last bits of money before I left the country, so I decided to just let her know what I thought about her. Kept writing notes like, "Freak off, you snooping snitch," and "We know what you're doing," and "Nothing to see here, we all just hate you," and hiding them deep in my drawer. We knew she had seen them, as her behavior changed slightly, but she couldn't admit to seeing them without admitting to snooping. Left that company and the country nearly 30 years ago, and don't regret it a single moment. My mind initially went to, well, if I was at this place late and I was the only one there, maybe I would be curious about like what's in the drawers too. But then I remembered, this is all at an ad agency, so what are you only almost ever going to find? Obviously, ad agency stuff. Very interesting. Shadows Princess 53 commented, my ex-mother-in-law was infamous for snooping. When my ex and I bought a house, I refused to allow her keys. She had watched our turtles and hamster when we were in Jamaica and went through every last little thing. Blamed me for pot. I was pregnant and hate pot. Went through our piles on my desk of bills, not knowing the State of the Union. Told all our friends and family we were broke. It was ridiculous. Fast forward to living with my now husband. My former sister-in-law comes over crying. I had warned her about the bee snooping, but she couldn't believe she did. Future sister-in-law, through tears, said she had trusted her, but just in case, set little things up to tell if she had snooped. I wasn't shocked, but she was. And then when she told me that mother-in-law was blabbing about future sister-in-law's meds, it was awful. Our next story is, yeah bro, these wheels will fit your truck. I had the same one. A few years ago, I owned an '08 F-150. Loved it. Sold my old car it was replacing and figured I'd get some nice wheels for it. Found a set I really liked, but Buddy obviously could tell I knew nothing about trucks at the time, but I knew enough to ask if they would fit a stock height truck. He assured me it would, so I paid the $1,000 for them. I didn't have a jack I trusted yet to change the wheels on a truck, so I took it to a tire shop the day after purchase. About an hour later, they called me saying for these to work, I would need a 2-inch lift and spacers, mostly because of the offset. I reached out to the seller, and he was rude and also said, I already spent the money bro, as is sale anyways. End of conversation, wouldn't reply further. Little choked, I went on Kijiji again and saw his ad was still up, so I made a new email account and replied to it, dude, these wheels are sick. I had a set of these on my old jacked up Ford I rolled. I just picked up another one and I'm on my way through town tonight. If you hold them for me, I'll toss you an extra 50. Within 5 minutes, Buddy texts me saying he felt bad they didn't work for me and got the cash to buy them back. I dropped the wheels off, left with my money, and man never showed up to pick them up that evening, despite multiple emails from the seller. His ad was up for weeks after. There's just so many games you have to play on like Craigslist and Facebook Marketplace. Like I saw people on social media trying to like recruit other people to mass lowball somebody so that they could swoop in and get a good price. A bunch of sub comments saying, oh, you don't just have multiple burner accounts to lowball every person you talk to. It's all just a frustrating game. I just want to pick up a coffee table for $5. Responsible Egg 3260 commented, that's a pretty genius revenge story. However, that's on you to make sure they fit before purchasing. Go on any online community related to the vehicle you own, and I guarantee there will be dozens, if not hundreds of posts of people asking, what size wheels or tires will fit, followed by a plethora of answers. OP responded, oh, 100%, and I wouldn't have done anything if it wasn't for spending 30 minutes talking in his driveway, assuring me they would fit perfect, and then ending our text interaction with, as is. He had a stock F-150 roofing work truck in his driveway too. The wheels themselves were only like 3/4 of an inch to an inch taller than my stock winter-rated tires, and having asked specifically if they would fit stock height, he lied straight to my face. My prior knowledge is little two-wheel drive cars. Our next story is, block me in, I'll drag your car away. Earlier post reminded me of my own petty revenge when I was blocked in by an inconsiderate person. The family and I decided to meet up for a holiday weekend kayaking trip. We all have our own kayaks, and knowing it would be an extremely busy day, we decided the most efficient way for us to get there was to carpool and transport all the kayaks with my utility trailer. We leave early in the day and get to the launch zone and unload. I go park in the trailer parking area, and we enjoyed our day out on the water. As expected, when we got back, the park was at full capacity, but what I did not expect was for someone to decide to park in front of my truck, blocking me in. After spending a full day out on the water, I was exhausted and ready to get home. Since it was towards the end of the day, I figured they would be coming back soon, so we just grabbed our kayaks and everyone carried them from the ramp to the truck instead of backing the truck down, hoping those people would return while we were loading, but they didn't. Fortunately, there was enough room that if I unhooked my trailer, I would be able to maneuver out from the spot. After about 30 minutes, I said freak it and decided to be the jerk everyone expects a four-wheel drive truck driver to be. The car blocking me in had a tow hook, and I had a tow rope in my toolbox, so I unhooked my trailer, set the tow rope to the car, and then quickly squeezed my truck out of the parking spot, lined up with the tow rope, and then drug his smaller car a few feet through the sandy grass until I could get my trailer out, then get the freak out. I really hope they noticed, though I'm sure this person was too incompetent to see the tire marks from his car being drugged through the sand, but it still makes me feel warm on the inside. You know, I'm just gonna say that I'm glad it worked out for OP. You know, if it were me and I had the dumb idea to just hook up and pull this car, I just know the whole back half of the frame would just fall apart. You know, let's just pull it off to the side a little bit, then I really would get the freak out quick. Tim Mensch commented, "Was at a party once at a conference center, and someone who knew the driver parked us in as a prank. They parked in the space next to ours, but at an angle blocking our car in. Rather than go back in to get them to move their car, the three of us decided to lift the small car enough to pivot it into its space. Never found out what happened to the others. They weren't my friends, so I never got the follow-up, but I always imagined they were perplexed how their prank didn't work, wondering how their car was suddenly parked perfectly." Our next story is, "Boss said I wouldn't last." To make a long story short, the boss of another department was making wisecracks about me during my first week. One or two is alright, but if I'm not entertained by it, why continue the banter? Anyways, he's super OCD and had the same parking space for the last 8 years. That's when this building opened. And for the last 5 weeks, I've been showing up just early enough to take that parking space every day. Slowly, his demeanor shifted from a snarky and sarcastic one to something noticeably more respectful. But I don't think I care. He showed his hand. I kinda just ignore him at this point, but the parking space is habit now. Also, I've been here 6 weeks and they're already throwing me a promotion? Must be doing something right. Edit, I'm a victim of my own pride. Honestly, I'm surprised how, they didn't double down and make it more snarky or more sarcastic. How was OP showing up early enough and taking their spot every single day, turning them into a more respectful person? Wouldn't they just be, more upset and resentful? Soccer Sprite Sleep commented, "Can confirm shifting someone else's parking situation is a great equalizer. My upstairs neighbor became a huge pain in my butt, and I made my schedule around being home when she came home from work around 3 to 3:30 p.m. to take her parking spot. She worked in office and I had a flexible hybrid job that allowed me to come and go as needed. I'll never understand why, but she liked this parking spot right outside my back door, literally 10 feet from my door when it was considerably further from her steps than mine. I could tell that she hated that I parked there, but there was nothing she or the leasing office could do since we didn't have assigned parking. She never knew peace in that parking lot." But with that being said, that's all the time we have for today. Now, if you want to hear another absolutely crazy revenge story, check out that video on the left. Or if you missed my latest video, check out that video on the right. That said, I'll see you all next time with some more stories.